I've always found it strange how certain memories from my childhood feel blurry, as if they belonged to someone else. Or maybe scenes from a dream I've had 100 times, but never managed to finish. Those sunny mornings when my dad taught me how to ride a bike. The silent breakfasts where he'd read the newspaper while I just watched. Those moments felt more like fragments from an old video than part of my real life, but I never questioned it. Deep down, there are some things we'd rather not stir up, until one day, reality gave way. It was just a regular Tuesday. I was sorting through some old boxes for my mom after she had to move into a smaller apartment. Between papers, photos, letters, and old trinkets, I found a family album I had never seen before. Curious, I started flipping through it. Strangely, the first pages were filled with childhood pictures, my mom smiling with me in her arms. Birthdays, vacations, it was all there, except for him. No photos of my father, no mention of him, as if he had been erased. My mom had always been vague about him. She said he was private, that he worked a lot, that he didn't like pictures. But this was different. It wasn't just absence. It was like he had never existed. A strange chill crawled down my spine. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, maybe a specific album with only photos of my mom. But something bothered me, because until that moment, I was certain I remembered him. I called her that same night and asked directly, "Why isn't Dad in any of the photos?" There was an uncomfortable silence. She took a deep breath and replied, her voice trembling, "Honey, you need to rest. You're tired. Sleep. We'll talk another time." But I couldn't sleep. In fact, that night I had the first dream, the first fragment. I was in a distorted version of my childhood home. Everything had a bluish tint, as if I was seeing it through a digital filter. There was a large mirror in the living room, covering an entire wall, and in it, I saw him, or something that looked like him, a man in a gray suit, with a neutral expression, standing behind me. But when I turned around, no one was there. I woke up with my heart pounding, but not with fear, with anger, as if someone was toying with my mind. And for the first time, I started writing everything down. In the following days, I dove deep into the search. I went through albums, called relatives, dug through old documents and school records, and the more I searched, the less I found. No birth certificate for him, no marriage license, no mention in official records. The last name I carried, it was only from my mom. My father was a ghost, or a glitch. I started to wonder, what if my memories were implanted? What if what I remembered from my childhood never happened? Instead of gaining clarity, everything began to darken. I started having lapses. Some days, I couldn't remember what I'd eaten. Others, I forgot how to get home. I caught myself reading phrases I didn't write, hearing voice notes I never recorded. Then, an email arrived. No sender, no subject, just an audio file attached, titled, "Awaken." The file began with static, but soon a male voice filled the room. A voice, eerily familiar, almost like my father's, but deeper, metallic. It said, "You are not who you think you are. Everything you remember was manufactured. The reality you know is a construct. Find the symbol. The key is in the reflections." A shiver ran through me. I looked around. The hallway mirror seemed darker than usual. I walked toward it, and for the first time, I didn't see my reflection. Just a figure, motionless, with eyes that gleamed like two tiny mirrors. And in that moment, something inside me broke, as if a layer had been peeled away from reality. From that moment on, everything began to change. The days that followed felt like mist and fragments. It was like living inside a puzzle where all the pieces had been subtly rearranged. People I knew started acting strangely. Coworkers asked how my mom was doing, even though I had never mentioned Her others said they'd seen me in places I'd never been. I began to doubt every conversation, every glance, every memory. I went back to the mirror several times. Sometimes, my reflection was there but with a slight delay, as if there was a 1-second gap between what I did and what it mimicked. Other times, the light around the glass flickered, revealing faint traces or markings, like codes that vanished when I tried to focus. The symbol mentioned in the recording, I still didn't know what it was, but I felt the mirror was more than an object. It was a portal, a glitch, a crack in the simulation I called reality. It was during a silent night that I had the second dream, if I can call it that. This time, I was in an abandoned train station. The sky was completely black, no stars, no moon, as if the world had been covered by a dark tarp. On a distant bench sat a hooded figure, motionless, watching me. I approached slowly. As I got closer, I saw there was no face beneath the hood, just a dense mist, swirling slowly. The figure extended its arm and placed something in my hand, a small glass disc with a symbol etched in the center. It was a triangle inside a circle, cut vertically by a single line. I woke up with my hand clenched, as if I were still holding the object. Of course, there was nothing there. But when I got up and went to the mirror again, it had changed. On the surface, almost imperceptibly, the same symbol was etched. I froze. It couldn't be real. For the first time, I touched the mirror with both hands. The glass was cold, but something happened. My fingers sank slightly into the surface, as if pressing against a liquid membrane. Instantly, an image formed, not of my reflection, but of a place I'd never seen. A kind of room with pulsing white light and walls lined with monitors. In the center, a metallic chair with straps and a circular projector on the ceiling. The image vanished within seconds, but it left something inside me, a piercing headache, like something had been reactivated. I spent the rest of the day dizzy, unable to concentrate. Voices echoed inside me, voices that sounded like my own, but saying things I'd never thought, as if multiple versions of myself were trying to surface at once. Then, another message arrived. This time, it was a video. Short, black and white, with constant static. It showed a younger version of myself, sitting in that same white room chair. My expression was vacant, and wires extended from my head to the ceiling. Behind me, someone was jotting something in a notepad. The camera shook. A caption blinked at the bottom. Identity support. Unstable. Correction required. The screen went black, and my phone froze for several minutes. From that point on, I stopped trusting everything. Time, people, even the sound of my own voice. Hours passed, and felt like they were repeating. Sometimes, the sun would rise from the wrong side of the window. Other times, objects in the house were misplaced, swapped paintings, books with altered titles, or even my name spelled differently on envelopes, as if someone was trying to recalibrate my reality. But getting the details wrong, I began hiding, avoiding contact, staying silent, because something told me I was being watched, not just by cameras, but by consciousness. Something observing me from within objects, reflections, even language itself. One of those nights, while the world outside seemed frozen still, like a painting, I heard a knock at the door. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Silence. I got up without thinking. When I opened the door, no one was in the hallway, but on the floor was a black envelope with my name written in silver letters. Inside, there was only a single handwritten note. When you find the room, don't resist. Remember, you asked to forget. The note I found still echoed in my mind, like a whisper carried by the wind. When you find the room, do not resist. Remember, you asked to forget. That message seemed to carry a weight I still couldn't fully understand, but it burned like a live ember inside me. In those days, everything seemed to unravel into a tangle of doubts and confusion. My memories became fragile, almost like dry leaves carried aimlessly by the wind. I no longer knew what was real, what had truly happened, and what had been fabricated to confuse me. It was as if I had been a puppet, and the strings were pulled by invisible hands, manipulating my mind. I returned to the mirror countless times. That strange object, which, somehow, held more secrets than I could imagine. Each time I touched it, I felt the glass pulse with an unknown energy, and I began to realize that the symbol glowing faintly was not just a drawing, it was an invitation, a key to something much greater. On a moonless night, I was visited by a dream, or perhaps a veiled memory. I was at an abandoned train station, where silence was absolute, and the sky seemed like a black curtain swallowing everything. A hooded figure sat on a distant bench, motionless and silent, its face a foggy void. Approaching it felt like walking through cold mist, but there was no fear, only a strange sense of destiny. It extended a hand and placed something in my palm, a glass disc with the same triangle inside a circle, cut by a vertical line. When I woke, my fingers were clenched as if still holding that object. I rushed to the mirror, and to my astonishment, the symbol had intensified, etched more sharply and pulsing with an almost hypnotic light. I decided to surrender to the mystery. I touched the glass with both hands, and suddenly felt my consciousness being pulled inside it. Not my body, but my mind, as if a part of me crossed a thin, invisible veil into an unknown place. I saw the white room I had only glimpsed before, smooth walls, aligned monitors, and a metal chair in the center, surrounded by static silence. There I was, trapped in that strange body, with wires connected to my head and scars around my eyes. It wasn't me, but a version of me, a fragment of who I could be or had been. The figures inhabiting that room had no faces or names. They simply existed, shadows of my own existence, perhaps. When one of them turned to me, I felt the weight of recognition. A voiceless voice said I was out of sync, that my identity was corrupted, that the experiment had repeated 37 cycles. I felt a wave of despair and collapse, but also a strange relief. I had chosen this. At some point, in some life, I asked to forget so I could find myself again. The truth was crueler and more beautiful than I had imagined. Reality shattered into fragments again, and I woke up in my room, sweaty, gasping, heart pounding. The mirror was there, intact, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. Now, every step in the world felt like a test, every person a mystery. I was no longer the same, but I also didn't know who I was. The journey had only just begun. The awakening of that night changed everything, but the truth was not ready to fully reveal itself. I was adrift, a lost fragment in an ocean of distorted memories, trying to piece together shards that seemed to slip through my fingers. Every step I took seemed to open doors to parallel realities, places where time did not follow fixed rules, and where human perception bent before the unknown. The days that followed were marked by a painful distancing from what I once considered familiar. People I once knew began to seem like shadows, muffled voices, and meaningless gestures, as if they were actors in a play, without a script. My own home, which should have been a refuge, transformed into a labyrinth, where corners hid secrets I could not decipher. It was during this time that I began to question the nature of my existence. Was it all just a simulation? A cruel game controlled by invisible forces? Or was I merely a piece in a bigger puzzle, a fragmented consciousness lost in layers of illusions? The answers, when they came, arrived in the form of symbols encoded, messages left as clues by those who might have been watching me or testing me. In one such moment, I received an encrypted file, anonymously sent to my device. Upon opening it, I was confronted by distorted images and sounds that seemed to come from another dimension, a kind of code pulsating with life itself. Decoding that message became an obsession. With every new pattern discovered, I felt I was getting closer to something greater, a truth that could both liberate and imprison me forever. It was a labyrinth of mirrors, reflecting multiple versions of myself, each with its own pain, hope, and doubt. In one of those mirrors, I found a phrase that seemed to sum it all up. Reality is a veil, and the truth lies behind it. That phrase followed me like a mantra, driving me forward even when fear threatened to paralyze me. But deep down, I knew this search was not only for external answers, but for an internal reunion, a reconciliation between the fragmented parts of my soul, crying out for unity and meaning amidst chaos. As I walked through this unstable ground, I began to realize that the reality I knew was only a superficial layer, and behind it existed hidden worlds, interconnected by invisible threads that few could see. And I, somehow, was beginning to see those threads. It was a painful awakening, but necessary. The veil was beginning to tear, and what I would find on the other side, I still did not know. As the veil began to tear, I realized that my journey was not just an awakening, but an immersion into a universe where the rules governing existence were malleable, fluid, and at times contradictory. I was entering a complex dance between the known and the unknown, where each step required courage to challenge my own convictions and make room for doubt. That doubt which sparks thought and destroys certainties. I understood that the search for truth was not a straight line but a spiral that led me inward and beyond what the senses could reach. There were moments when I felt the presence of other consciousnesses, scattered fragments sharing with me pieces of their stories, their pain, and their yearnings. It was as if we were connected by an invisible web, where time and space dissolved into a single continuous experience. In this immersive experience, I began to realize that my identity was not fixed, but a mosaic in constant reconstruction. The memories I thought were mine were, in fact, pieces borrowed from other realities. Echoes of parallel lives and choices I never made, yet still resonating inside me. This led me to question the idea of free will. Are we truly masters of our decisions, or mere puppets in a pre-written narrative? Amidst these doubts, a figure emerged from the shadows, an entity whose presence was both comforting and unsettling. It had no defined face, but its eyes shone with ancient wisdom, as if carrying the essence of countless eras. This figure spoke no words, but its communication transcended language, a silent dialogue that penetrated deeply into my consciousness, opening doors to new perceptions. With this new awareness, I saw beyond the veil once again, discovering that what seemed a boundary was, in fact, a passage, a portal to a world where the laws of physics, morality, and even logic bent before the complexity of existence. There, I found landscapes made of liquid light, structures shaped by thought, and beings existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But what struck me most was the awareness that every choice we make, even those that seem insignificant, reverberates through these layers of reality, shaping not only our destiny, but the collective fate of all that exists. The responsibility weighed on my shoulders, a burden I could not ignore. As I slowly returned to the world I knew, I felt something inside me had changed irreversibly. I was no longer just a spectator, but an agent, a fragment of change in a much larger weave. NeoDawn was not just a file lost in time, it was the seed of a new consciousness, a hope that even amid chaos and manipulation, truth could emerge. Time seemed to have lost its meaning as I moved through this new world of infinite possibilities and disconcerting paradoxes. Each moment brought a revelation, but also a heavier burden, the awareness that my existence was intertwined with something much greater, an invisible fabric that united all realities, all consciousnesses, into a single tapestry of life and meaning. As I walked through this complex weave, I felt a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of the unknown, of what was yet to come, and hope that despite all the darkness, the light of truth might finally emerge. I had become an unwitting guardian of this secret, a fragile link between what was and what could be. It was in this expanded state of consciousness that I received the final message, the one that could change everything. A coded message, like the others, but different, charged with urgency and promise. It spoke of an imminent convergence, a moment when the various layers of reality would align, offering a rare window to access absolute truth. This convergence, the message said, would not be for everyone, only those brave enough to cross the veil. Those willing to face their own shadows and embrace uncertainty could survive the final awakening. For the rest, oblivion would be the only option, a return to the limbo of ignorance, where life unfolds like a fleeting dream. As I reflected on this, I realized my journey was about to reach its climax, and the choices I made now would affect not only me, but the entire network of interconnected consciousnesses. It was a terrifying responsibility, a test of courage and faith. But despite the weight, I felt renewed clarity. I was no longer alone. There were others, hidden in the shadows, fighting the same fight, fragments of resistance scattered across the fabric of reality. NeoDawn was not just a lost story, but the beginning of a silent revolution, a call to awaken minds and free souls. And as the veil continued to tear, a shiver ran down my spine, a promise that beyond fear and doubt, there was something greater, a light no one could extinguish. The future was coming, and I was ready to face it.